I would say my first year, the most fun class that I took was the Drugs from Bugs class that is in the MFG department. It was such a fun class because you get to go into the field, collect a soil sample, and try to isolate an antibiotic from it throughout the semester. So that was such a fun project and a great way to really get involved hands-on in the lab right away. So I loved that. I'm Elisabeth Roadcap. I'm studying molecular genetics, and I had a minor in health and society, and I'm from Milford, New Hampshire. When I applied to UVM, I had originally thought environmental science, but I knew I wanted to be in CALS. And as soon as I started the molecular genetics program, I knew MMG was the right department for me. I think MMG is so unique because it has those amazing connections in both colleges, because I think that's such an advantage. I didn't directly work with any professors outside of my classes in the medical school, but it was amazing to have professors who were in that setting. My immunology professor was in the medical school, so it's really helpful to have people who have different perspectives, and then also to have the potential for those connections. If I was interested in pursuing research in one of those fields that's more studied in the medical school, I would have had connections to be able to pursue that. So it was a bit of a coincidence to be starting in the pandemic and also be studying molecular genetics, since much of what I studied was about infectious diseases. But throughout my degree, I was able to study infectious diseases, chronic diseases, things like cancer genetics, immunology. So I was able to develop a strong background in all of those. When I initially started, I thought the overlap between animal and human health was really interesting, kind of what's known as the One Health perspective, looking at animals, the environment, and human health and how they all interact. So for a time I was interested in potentially veterinary medicine, and so I got some experience doing that and realized that wasn't quite the path I wanted to take. But I did get involved in an animal science lab on campus, Dr. Barlow's lab, and I did a genetics project for him throughout the rest of my undergraduate career, and so that turned into my honors college thesis, doing a whole genome assessment of Staphylococcus aureus, which is a pathogen that can cause mastitis in a lot of different dairy livestock. But research was really exciting to me because I was able to focus on one question and try to, dig into it and see if I could explore data in a new way or describe something new, and I really enjoyed writing about that as well. But I also knew that field specifically that I was doing the research in wasn't what I wanted to pursue long term, but it was an amazing experience for me. I did an RU program, which is a research experience for undergraduates, the summer between my sophomore and junior year. So that's funded by the National Science Foundation, and I went to the University of Maine for a summer to conduct research there. And it ended up being kind of tangentially associated with what I was doing here at UVM, studying Staphylococcus aureus, since I had a background in familiarity with the organism. So I did a project looking at that in Maine, and that was a really amazing experience to kind of develop a project in a 10-week period and be able to have something to show in a scientific poster and everything by the end of that. I think it was really helpful to try to establish myself as a young professional in a new environment, because I wasn't there just as a student. I was there to complete a project for these mentors who were, looking to have me accomplish and meet a goal by the end of the summer. So that was a new role, rather than having a professor see me as a student first and then join their lab. It was different to meet them in that different role, I guess. And so I think the most valuable thing I learned was how to ask questions, whether that was questions of my mentor about what they were looking for in the project. And I had a lot of flexibility and ability to influence where the project was going to go and give my own input about my interests, and I was lucky in that regard. But it was also a little bit hard at times to figure out exactly what I needed to do to get to the end goal, because it was so flexible. So I really learned what questions to be asking about, how am I going to get from the very beginning all the way to that end product. And then also how to ask questions about my research specifically, what are the types of things we need to be thinking in terms of budgeting for the different tools that we're going to be using, time in the lab, training, coordination with people that I need to be working with. So I think it gave me a really broad oversight of what goes into research as a whole, rather than just doing the lab work, which is more of what I was doing at UVM, the more laboratory skills. So I got to see the bigger picture of it. So over spring break of my senior year, I participated in a travel study course called Women's Health and Spirituality in Belize. It was a 9-day trip, and there were 10 students on the trip. And beforehand, we had lots of readings to do, a project to prepare, like a research project about a specific aspect of women's health or healthcare in Belize generally. And then we all met twice before we actually traveled, and then over spring break we went to Belize and really met the whole group for the first time when we got there. And it was a whirlwind of a week. It went by so fast, but we learned so much. We spent the first half of the week in the western part of the country where more Mayan people live. And so I had the opportunity to meet with people who have traditional Mayan healing practices. We got to observe a clinic that is essentially the equivalent of a Planned Parenthood facility here. We went to the only inpatient mental health facility in the country. And then the second half of the week, we went to the coastal region of Belize and spoke with the Garifuna people. And they have more Caribbean influences, and they have a spiritual understanding of health and for certain conditions as well. So it was interesting to hear their interpretations and understandings of health from those perspectives and compare them to the Mayan people and also to my own beliefs. And throughout the trip, we did a lot of journaling as well, so a lot of reflection on making those connections and recognizing what's different, what's the same, and how that could be applied to my life and what I can take away from it. Yeah, everything there was very intentional. Interesting and kind of inspiring to see. I feel like everything, whether it was like a color or the way you said something or what you were eating, everything just had a meaning, or everyone seemed very connected to what they were doing in their lives. So that was a really neat thing to witness. I think my most important part of my UVM experience was my honors college thesis. It was a little intimidating when I entered the honors college. I wasn't sure what it was going to be, what that would really look like, but I loved doing it. I found it to be a really empowering experience because I was able to take ownership of a project similar to what I was doing in Maine, but on a larger scale, and really develop it and work with professors and meet a lot of different faculty on campus. I got to work with a statistician here and meet with other professors who had input and knowledge about what I was working on. And then also being able to put together a manuscript. I was lucky enough to have my professor support me in getting that published, so we're currently in the review process, so that would be amazing if that could turn into a published document. But I think that was my most important thing, was that challenge and really pushing myself outside of my classes to apply what I'd learned into a real-world experience. So this year I was selected as the 2024 Lawrence Forcier Outstanding Senior Award. And I was incredibly honored and surprised to be chosen for this award. I felt that it was a great recognition of all the work that I've put in over the last 4 years, and also reflects on the connections I've been able to make and the professors that have supported me throughout my time here. I really, really appreciate all the connections that I've developed and the investment that a lot of these professors have made in me, and I'm honored that they see so much potential in my abilities and that they've been willing to support me and help me so much throughout my time here. I think it reflects not only my academics, but then also my involvement in the community, mostly as I've been serving the community through the Honors College here, doing a lot of event planning and mentoring of other students. I'm glad that I was able to kind of balance all those components together, and yeah, it's been an incredible time here. It's very exciting. It's hard to believe it's happening already, but it went by so fast and I've had so many amazing experiences, so I'm excited to apply what I've learned, and I feel prepared to go on to the next steps. So in the fall, I'll be pursuing a Master of Health Administration at Cornell University, and I also will be a Sloan Leadership Fellow in the program, and so I'm very excited about that. I had a lot of support from my CALS faculty. I felt that a lot of their letters of recommendation and the experience that I've gained through the CALS and MMG department specifically have really prepared me for that experience and really set me up to be a strong applicant for the program, so I'm really grateful for that. But ultimately, what I'd like to do with my master's degree is pursue a position in research administration. I think I'd like to be in an academic hospital setting, working with research administration for potentially clinical trial management. So that's really the space that I'm most interested in right now. And so I think my background working in the lab and understanding human health from that molecular background and having more of a scientist perspective will be really important going into an administrative